Hello everybody and welcome to Dimehead. In today's video, I want to showcase the output routing features which come with the NAND player pedal, since these are a real standout in the current market situation. Smaller form factor capturing players like the Dimehead NAND Players one often lack the ins and outs in order to cater towards a variety of different situations, but not so the Dimehead NAND Player. This one has some outstanding flexibility in its routing and punches therefore way above its league. Just to give you an understanding of the situations which I'm talking about. So usually when you use units like these instead of the big players like the Kemper Profiler or the Quad Cortex or the Line 6 Helix, the entire floorboard, then usually you want to kind of put them into your pedal board. And if you want to use them in your pedal board, then you're already trying to downsize your rig. If you are downsizing your rig, but you're still playing smaller venues, you still have to offer the flexibility in order to run either through front of house with your signal, so you're giving that out to the PA, to the front of house, so they take care of that, or if you're playing in really smaller venues like small clubs or something, you are still reliant on the old school cabinet setup. So you need some sort of power amp and cabinet. And with most of the units out there which have this form factor and offer capturing technology, you are bound to either using the impulse response or not using the impulse response after it. So you don't have the flexibility to send out one output with the impulse response, one without the impulse response. This over here changes completely with the Dimehead NAND player and is one of the standout features of this against the competition out there. Alright, let's explore what I was just talking about in real life so that we can basically kind of make a picture out of what I just talked about. So what I got over here is I got the NAND player prepared and it's set up with two outputs, as you can see. So the first output is my line out, and that's going into my Harley Benton GPA 100 power amplifier, and that's powering my 2x12 Harley Benton Vintage 30 vertical cabinet, which I got over here, and that in turn is mic'd up by an SM57 already over here into my interface. However, you're not hearing that because I have currently set my interface out of my DI out. The DI out takes the entire DSP signal chain and that's moving into my interface. And in Reaper, I can switch between the two, and I'm currently set to the DI out over here. This is going to sound like the sounds which you might know out of my other videos over here, quite forward with the impulse response. Also got a reverb on that for demonstration purposes, which we're going to get to in a moment. Now, if you were in the room with me, you could hear that even though I selected like that you're only hearing the DI out, you could hear that the cabinet is being powered as well, but with a signal which already has the IR baked in. So that's unfortunately the situation which you are left with a lot of the different smaller form factor modeling units out there, because they don't have the processing power or the routing flexibility to send out one out with the IR and one without the IR. Not so the Dimehead NAND player. It has this amazing feature which I'm really happy about, and we're gonna explore right now. So if you go with the param encoder to the settings menu, you got the very first section which is called line out tap after. That's the function which we are after. Here you can decide what this output is getting kind of in signal from. So I'm gonna now move ahead in Reaper and switch over to the mic'd up setup, so you can hear that we're currently getting a signal which has an IR captured scenario into a mic'd up scenario. So we got a mic'd up scenario into a mic'd up scenario, and it's gonna sound very muddy, very much like you're putting a big blanket over the speaker. It has nowhere the bite which I get out of the DI out setup over here. Let's move again over to the mic'd up setup. So how can we mitigate? How can we use this feature in order to kind of get rid of this muddiness but still retain the clear signal which is going to the front of house, for example, out of the DI out? Well, easy. We're going to use the line out tap after, not the IR, but the actual room setup. So if we go back to the menu, let's go back here to IR, leave it where it is, And if we close that menu, we can see over here that the room module where the reverb is placed is right before the IR. So we want to have basically a line out tap after the room. So we're not taking the IR into consideration, but everything else. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and set this to room. And this is now what we're getting out of the mic'd up situation. This sounds very much more like the real amplifier situation where you got the amplifier into the cabinet and so on and so forth. Tone is subjective, so you might dislike the tone which you're hearing over here, but this is kind of the real deal. Now you could go ahead and set up the treble maybe a little bit less or set up the bass a little bit more, whatever, to your likings. But we're not having that blanket going anymore over the speaker, and this is a huge thing, and you got a lot of different possibilities over here. Let's go to the very extreme. So we're gonna make an line out tap after the boost NAM. Since I'm not using any boost NAM over here, this is basically my clean de-ice guitar signal. So listen over here. After the EQ will be after the first NAM block and its respective EQ. So we're going to have only the amplifier basically. Then we got the room. So we also have the modulation or the room reverb effect or the tremolo effect incorporated. And afterwards, we got the high pass, low pass, and the IR. However, I personally view high pass, low pass kind of in tandem with the IR. So to me personally, it doesn't make that much sense to go with the line out tap after the high pass and low pass, but your mileage may vary. So I'm gonna leave it to after the room. So now I'm gonna play a little bit on the mic'd up setup, and then I'm gonna switch over to the front of house setup where I'm using the impulse response. So with this routing flexibility, you finally have now, let's say, the situation where you can cater towards both using a cabinet and feeding off the front of house with an amazing guitar signal. And this is, huge, especially for the smaller gigging musicians out there who have to remain super flexible, who cannot kind of always ride the same setup and ride the same, setup with their floorboards. And yeah, this is a huge feature in my opinion and a real standout towards the competition in the market. Now that you learned truly about the ins and outs of your NAM player pedal, I'm going to wish you a happy gigging the next time you're going to utilize the full flexibility of this small little beast and going to riff you out of this video.